This is why, if you're an anti-liberal, you have to believe on the premise that race is real, that men and women are different, violence. You know this too. Like if you go to the gym every day, you are manifesting some form of violence so you can like kill someone, and that's a good thing. These are, biological realities, and like no one has ever made intellectual premises on these like evolutionary psychology things. People flirt with it, but that's so how much of liberalism is about saying we're all the same. And I find it concerning because they don't want to look at art differently.
Think of the word Wasian. It does have a certain passive application in terms of just how it sounds and just how it's generally used. When you think of the Wasian person, you think of this generally passive, soft-spoken, liberal, half-white, half-Asian person. And I think that there is this more sort of masculine attachment to the word Hapa, and then by extension, of course, Hapaborean. Intrinsically more right-wing, intrinsically more masculine-oriented, intrinsically more active and aggressive. Salvete Legionaries. Today we have a very, very special episode. I have yet to have one of my Hapaborean brothers join a podcast, and we've known each other, been mutuals for a bit, and we've been talking about doing a HAPABOREA podcast for quite some time. Of course, ALYSA LIU has gone to the forefront of the frog Twitter zeitgeist, out there in the Olympics getting double gold. So we'll talk a bit about that, a bit about Asian Aryanism. But without further ado, Joe, Pilleater, if you just briefly introduce yourself to the Legionaries.
Thanks, Patrick. I go by the internet by Pilleater. That's my name. It was established on April 5th, 2009 on a website called you'rethemanNowDog.com, ytmd.com. So that was around from 2003 to now. It's kind of before you had memes. They were called fads, and you would upload pictures on the internet with music and text. The Pilleater name was meant as, there was no term for this, but a shitpost name based on a guy named Ink Drinker, who was kind of an older troll. And it was just to post memes of what we'd call Mr. Krabs, which was kind of this, oh yeah, Mr. Krabs kind of yells and screams. And I was doing it when I was 18. I was a part of the Moon Crew with Farkle. So you would get pictures of Moon Man and go in Microsoft Sam and say really funny racist stuff, which was considered very avant-garde back then, which then TRS, rightstuff.biz, found in 2016, which is hard to say is 10 years ago. We were doing it in like 2009, 10. I've used the Pilleater name since, and I never really let it go because people would just call me Pilleater. Later, after doing YTMD video art stuff, go to college, all that fun stuff. I started a website called AsianAryanism.com, which was basically a WordPress started by my friend in Europe, and he wanted me to be the admin of it. But it started out as an indoor meme on 4chan, which I didn't even coin the term. The term was made up by people on 4chan, which then kind of by hearsay, you take it and then call it yours. And I guess I was the poster child for it for about a year. Then I didn't want to operate the website, so it was taken down by mid or late 2017. So it really only lasted a year and a half. There was even a New York Times journalist who reached out to me, and I said no. Because at that time, I just graduated college, and which I thought was a joke became more edgy, and I just didn't feel like it. But nonetheless, in college, I've always was a fanatic of the far right and intersexual internet politics. I was writing about the alternative right in 2014, 2015, even before Hillary Clinton going to Reno, Nevada to talk about it, to say, warning Democrats, don't vote for Trump. There's this thing called the alternative right, which later then shortened to alt-right. I participated in early countercurrents meetings with Greg Johnson. They would have meetings in Philadelphia and as well as New York as the New York Forum. So people like John B. Morgan and the TRS guys were there as well. Some other more obscure figures like James J. O'Mara. This kind of accumulated with Discord groups at the time, like the Jersey Goys, things like Richard Spencer's pre-Radix NPI. I had some friends connected to that, especially Alex Goldstein. His band was Harpoon Forever. His band members later have a band called Garcia's Peoples. Alex still lives in New Jersey. People like Robert Stark, who's been since 2008 based out of Santa Barbara, who do these kind of college radio station interviews. with weird people, which was considered kind of post-Titanic, post-industrial, but goes back to the countercurrents things. Eventually, this would accumulate of me going to American Renaissance, out of research, doing other things, doing my own Vermin Supreme kind of protest pranking, which eventually I actually went to Unite the Right. And I made it public even back then, too. I even went on my YouTube channel and said, hi, guys, I'm going to go to Unite the Right. I'll see you there. Nothing bad's going to happen, right? And it turns out that event was really big. It was live streamed. I remember having a megaphone and wearing an SNK Athena t-shirt, thinking nothing much of it. I just thought, like, I'm an Asian Aryan. Let me do this Vermin Supreme. Go to my website. And then I guess the Heather Heyer thing happened, and we dispersed from the scene. So there's that too. And then there was kind of this period where it looked like the far right, as we knew it, turned to Jerry Springer trash TV ideals with Ethan Ralph, blood sports. So you'd have like every major figure doing drama and all that things. And that's when you hear this ideal of grifting or the post-identity Europa theme, which dispersed further, the rise of Keith Woods. Nick Fuentes was more like a spin-off character from the Beards and Beardley show, which would be on Luke Ford. Many of those old people started to rotate, and now we're in this weird period 6 years later where Nick Fuentes seems to be the leader. Other people spin off. Maybe there's a Patrick Casey and Jay Burden with their own show, but it just doesn't have the same vibe. There's a Thomas 777 and a Zoltanis. They're all interesting people, but it's just not the same. And people are getting subculture mixed up. And to make a long story short, I've been making internet memes forever. And one of them was Save Sleazy last year. It's almost been 368 days since I made Save Sleazy. I reposted it 2 days ago and it got 150,000 views because people would rather want to talk about PG-13 related, what the liberal elite are doing in New York. And then they find out, well, there's this weird Asian fetishist racist guy named Pilleater doing it. How is this even remotely possible? Is this guy autistic or something? How does he know everything at once? And that's just like a Wikipedia front if I had to be improv in just 5 minutes what I'm about. But I have a website and I do X. I don't do Instagram because I'm banned there. I have every other social media platform, and I currently DJ for a college radio station, and I make music and just pretty much a normal person. I mean, normal. I mean to say eccentric individual in the traditions that I shook John Waters' hands when I went to graduate school. So I don't know what to make of that, but I think we're all relatively in agreement that there's this Eurasian Asian American thing that's happening, and that came from my studies at Temple University for being an Asian American studies major, which I majored in design instead. So yeah, it's all relative. So I think it's interesting. I think you represent it. And I think you're kind of a flagship ideal of it. You know, I don't have to struggling 10 years ago to talk about it. So there's other people doing it today. So it's called something else, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this offline a little bit, like the sort of post-alt-right scene and how that sort of either evolved or degraded. But what I guess we were kind of going to talk about today, and we can go back to that topic as well, is this is a very timely podcast. And of course, we're doing this podcast when we're doing it specifically because of a certain someone named ALYSA LIU, who, there's a lot of people are talking about her right now. Jared Taylor's talking about her. Steve Saylor wrote, albeit a very short article about her. All the sort of meme posters like Surf, like Severus Chud are doing the Sonnen Rod or swastika edits with her, twirling around in the ice rink. But what I think is interesting is what you've been saying for a long time with Asian Aryanism is sort of coming into fruition in the sense that you have the most hardcore Wignats, the most racist Wignats who are simping over this Hapaborean queen, so to speak. And of course, I think both you and I certainly have a great affinity, as you've said, for our Hyperborean brothers, so to speak. So it's not that we're not trying to just mix out all of these Hyperboreans and get rid of them, but we're also trying to say, well, there is a unique subculture with Hapa people that has a unique manifestation that is its own thing. We don't just have to put ourselves into this box of being either white or Asian. But I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about is, what do you make of this sort of phenomena, the ALYSA LIU effect, so to speak? And maybe we can go into the sort of eugenic history of what her dad was doing, because that's kind of crazy too.
Right. I mean, well, from what I understand, I don't watch the Olympics. In fact, I think I remember the Olympics from last year ago. They had this weird, strange, satanic opening where it was like everything was rainbow colored, and it was like the Last Supper and all that. I think that was last year. And now this year, all of a sudden, it changed in the winter, where it turns out everybody's Eurasian and everybody's half white, half Asian. So it's funny how you frame the argument where, 12 years ago, Elliot Rodgers comes and a Malay British guy does a school shooting and kills the Stacys and Chads or whatever. And now that's damage, even if you're not even Malay, you're just Chinese, Japanese, Korean, whatever, Filipino. It doesn't matter. It's just you're Eurasian. I think that r/HAPA Reddit, of the most weird normie liberal tier stuff, is in an existential crisis because it eventually showed its true colors when it just all became radical communists from the works of Douglas Kim, who say the white male, Asian female mind virus, like it's Foucault or something. And I think that's now kind of being debunked, where you put this Leni Riefenstahl ideal of the Olympics, and it turns out there are normal men. I say normal as in someone who's not that bright, and looks at these characters, or, the Tiger Woman, and it's, oh, she's hot, I want to have sex with her, I want to masturbate to her, and that's totally fine and normal. I mean, again, normal as in that you give a positive relationship to, she's conceived, like you said, from a white egg donor to a Chinese guy who has the wealth. Now, I think that's very interesting compared to, say, was it Eileen Gu from 4 years ago, and that premise was, Eurasian daughter of white male, Asian female, but sides with China. Now, I could go into the politics of G7 and China. We're in the United States, so we're G7, so that's liberal capitalist idealism, right? BRICS would be socialist future. Brazil, Russia, India, China is right, post-capitalism. I know there's some argumentation there, especially Richard Spencer taking the side of G7 and Jason Georgiani, and then Richard Wolff and David Harvey doing BRICS. You see that divide there. But regardless, I think it's Eurasian either way. But with the technology part, it's showing that, listen, if the r/HAPA people who are saying how bad white male, Asian female is, their remedy, ironically, was, well, we'll just celebrate Asian male, white female, because Asian males who get white women work extra hard for it. Well, what's going to happen if they just ignore white women together and they get technology to just have their sperm donated with an egg, and they skip white women altogether? So then it's like, well, if you take that stance with this technological like transhumanist thing going on, then you understand, like, why did white men go with Asian in the first place? And this is for the Wignats too. They went with Asian women in the first place because, your average white woman in Pennsylvania or Ohio is just not interested in a guy who's way too uh, based on virtue or like nerdy and smart. She just wants that, like, Andrew Tate football playing performative male. And if a white guy can't do it, what makes you think an Asian guy can do it? And I think with this technology of just what Eurasianism is becoming, it's one with the designer baby. It's one that you can design your kids of the future. If you could do it in a grassroots way, where you're naturally white male, Asian female, trying to find the good bourgeois life against a post-capitalist society, and you have your Asian kids here or there, that's kind of almost the same on a higher level when you have money in a liberal here, G7, where you can take the technology to have the kid. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Here's the thing, I'm actually in favor of it simply because it's designer eugenics. And like you said with Jared Taylor, Uncle Tay is saying, listen, regardless of what happened, skeptics of eugenics can't ignore this. Genes are real. So whether they're playing this game saying, all right, all the elites are Eurasian, we've known this, we've played with you, all the Pixar, all the Disney movies have been saying it to your kids, But you can have Elliot Rodgers. That could be a psyop as well. And I've talked this with my friends before. That could be a psyop to discourage you. So you can say whites become second-class Jews or Amish, and you condense yourself, but you don't grow, right? It's more like Eurasians are growing, and they're going to be a managerial class, and they're kind of, succumbing to this ideal of this fascist beauty. And you call it Hapaboreanism. And again, when I say Aryan, it's facetious. It's like, well, Aryan as in this Leni Riefenstahl ideal. It takes a very normie liberal person to get upset over it. When you ask, make a long story short, when you ask a liberal, can you fetishize your own race? And they say no. So that just leaves an argument for white nationalism compared to say, what if I desire, I don't know, an Indian woman who does Bollywood and she has Aryan ideals? No, you're just a race mixer. You're a mud shark. So I guess that ideal about how we think about translationalism is going to have a big impact of how we design our people in the future. And eugenics is going to become more of a secret thing practiced among the bourgeoisie and the upper middle classes, all while we're going to have this weird Jetsons scenario where people are in the towers and everybody out at the bottom is going to be brown and chaotic and dysgenic. Because this is why I think people like Andre Williams and black nationalists have something to say, is because in a Tom Sowellian way, they want their black kids to stop acting like, bad people. Now, it could be outrageous and tell you more, but we all know. And I think there's this racial divorce going on where it's just, you can't have America acting like Africa.
Yeah, and the whole thing with, since we're talking about designer babies, I mean, this guy, I guess Mr. Leo, I don't know what his first name is, he was living in a one-bedroom apartment with 5 kids because, he just wanted to have kids with white women. So he had 5 kids. They're living in like a 1-2-bedroom apartment. And I think in large part that's because of how much money he had to shelf out to be able to pay for these egg donors. So he was really, in a sort of irrational way, dedicated to pursuing some sort of aesthetic ideal, perhaps, or whatever the hell his intentions were. But I think it's interesting in regards to the sort of, I guess, I would say, petty view of race mixing, because clearly on a certain level we can understand that European peoples, they don't want, we look at Europe, the birth rate, whatever, obviously they don't want a bunch of Arabs and Africans coming in and just, getting rid of them demographically. That makes sense. But they take this argument, right, which makes a lot of sense, and then you apply it across the board, and like you said, there could be the most white passing Indian so far as you can. Like the meme is, this is what Alexander the Great saw when he crossed the Indus. And it's the Bollywood type. They're generally higher caste, they're paler, they look a little bit like a Lebanese woman. And they'll say that's wrong. Or they'll say that, in terms of the Hapa argument, that Asian women would be wrong. And clearly we see that the product of that, which would be somebody like ALYSA LIU, is aesthetically pleasing to them. So it kind of discombobulates their principled argument against them. It makes them kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, if this is aesthetically pleasing, what is fundamentally our opposition to this specific race mixing? Because I think there's a huge difference between, like I said, some Africans and Middle Easterners coming into Europe and demographically replacing the native population. And there's a huge difference with the sort of Silicon Valley white male, Asian female thing that's going on, which is totally different, and kind of both goes against the aesthetic argument and also goes against the whole larger demographic argument, because these people are coming in, they're highly educated, they're contributing to society, so it becomes an entirely different conversation. But in regards to Asian Aryanism and the project that you've had for so long, I guess, why don't we try to, just for the audience, like define Asian Aryanism and then maybe connect it a little bit to the sort of, I guess, the evolution of Hapa as we see it today, especially with ALYSA LIU.
Okay, so remember, Asian Aryanism was something I didn't make up. It was something already talked on 4chan. There were some anonymous user as long as back as 2015 was saying Aryan Asians or something. There was a sadist writer by the name of Jennifer Suzuki who said something about an Asian Aryan rising of the future. Now, I have it in my bookshelf over there. I could go get it for you. It's really out of print, but you can find weird race play pornographic books that, especially under the name of Jennifer Suzuki, I think Suzuki's back a bit. I kind of have ideals who that person is, but I'm not so sure. And it was kind of just put as a joke. When I was in a room with Alexander Stankard, known as Harlan Venison, he had a website called Acid Right, and this was way before Mark Fisher did Acid Communism. It was acidright.info. And we would joke, and, we have a few beers and whatnot. And his place at New Brunswick, New Jersey, he was just like, well, can you imagine an Asian Aryan society? I'm like, what's the point of you being an Asian studies major? Are you just going to be like a blue-pilled liberal and just assume, don't look at my Asian wife, I'm going to have your Asian children? It seems like a self-defeatist position. And that's kind of the realization where it's like, well, as someone who likes Asian studies and someone who also actually cares, as a liberal in that thinking, you think you would learn and try to help people, but when you have the discussions, you can't. And so Asian Aryanism almost becomes default. The word Aryanism just pisses off people. I really think we are in this kind of George Orwellian society right now where new words are always made every year. They say these are young kids' words, like, back then they would be like stop being square or something like that. But that's so 70 years old. How in the world does a word like cooked come about? I feel like that's not grassroots. I feel like that is made in some lab that's developed by publishing houses that push some ideals how you should think out of this weird mimic desire of sorts. These ideals where liberals now go, stop being obsessed, or you're weird. Things which were cool 20 years ago, but now have been inverted through an Orwellian type of language. And I think that's very dangerous, especially on X, where, they'll use words like digital footprint instead of the positive of saying you have a legacy and brand. And I think this all goes well with how words like Wasian has entered the text, where unlike HAPA, which is negative, because HAPA, technically speaking, means Hawaiian Eurasian, that you're Japanese, Hawaiian, white, but then like a kind of an insult, you just take it for what it is, HAPA. Somebody on X wrote, what is a great insult term against a Wasian? HAPA. Right, as weird as that sounds, because it's so true. And now you've just taken the word to mean whatever you want. I mean, Wasian was something positive made up by TikTokers, or at least to say being white and Asian. And instead of looking at a picture of every offspring of Eurasian, white male, and they're all school shooters, couldn't you make like a positive poster of Keone Reeds and other esoteric icons? And it seems like we keep rewinding over Elliot, Rodgers, and Kelly Wang. And by the way, I'm a fan of Kelly Wang. I saw Kelly Wang's art gallery event in Princeton, New Jersey. I have some pictures of it. I got to talk to her, but I just don't share it because I don't know. People don't believe me. But anyway, I feel like just like the things is like what you're saying with the words, that a lot of people just jump to conclusions on that. And so when I was doing Asian Aryanism, I just thought of it more as like a fun thing in like punk music, or like you say these words like Weekly World News and people would get it. But even like a decade ago, I've had like both safe sleazies and women being offended. How could you say such a thing? Now, I think 10 years later, 15 years later, these people are still on Instagram and have these white collar managerial jobs, which they do absolutely nothing. And they during 6 years ago, during COVID, definitely just stayed at home and collected their money to live in Brooklyn and LA or SF. I think these people, the reason why they're politically correct is that they have boss hounds and boomers over them, and they're not independent, not doing things like day trading or doing eBay and crypto like that. And so when you have financial freedom, you can say whatever you want, like John McCaffrey or something. But most people do not realize that because they still have this post-boomer ideal of being dependent. So I think in the text, or in the way we speak, people became so concerned about doxing and about, oh, you don't want to lose your job, I'll just call up someone on your phone, you'll lose your customer support getting $22 an hour, which is BS today. How inflated everything is. You need $50 an hour. But it just shows you that we don't live in the same world we did 20, 30 years ago. And I think that's the boomer way of living that still thinks, I remember another Eurasian post came in about saying, like, what did boomers really like think Japanese were it? Compared to say, well, we didn't have enough Japanese to go around. We have Chinese and Korean or Filipino. So that's what most people are going to go. And then you realize if everybody has a Chinese wife, oh, they're going to read Xi Jinping, and oh, they're going to be sympathetic to communism. And then they're going to be like, well, we got In the Mood for Love and bizarre Chinese C-pop. You just don't understand. And it's like, it doesn't work like that, because then you're messing up all the Japanese stuff that happened from 20, 30 years that was pushed. And this is why this goes back to the G7 argument. The Japanese as the idealistic form of high Asian beauty. And you'll see this from Giorgiani and Richard Spencer and Jared Taylor. The ideal is the premise is that Japanese are assimilated to the white standard. But guess what? There's less than like 1 million Japanese in the United States. There's more Chinese and Koreans. So we're in a very hostile environment where we can't just project upon Chinese and Koreans liking anime, video games, hangtai, and porn. And yet they all do. All the e-girls on OnlyFans do that. And it's just a girl, a Malay girl or a Singaporean girl role playing that she's Japanese. You see it all the time. And so this is like gives this weird form of transracialism happening where I guess what is Asian, to wrap this up, back to what you're saying, Asian becomes white. You're not saying like white, you could be French, German, Irish, and this is what the liberals love to do and beat us all the time. White, you don't have a culture. You're just some like Malay mutt. So therefore you should be open about everything. But when it's Asian, it doesn't matter if you're Chinese, Korean. The Korean journalist who writes for some Vice magazine has to be sympathetic to Japanese, even though the Japanese ruled over Koreans. How are you going to deal with that? And you see this with like the conflict of, and this is why I've been interested in things like Mitsuki or Japanese breakfast and whatnot, is like, how can you have a Japanese and American and a Korean American get along together? It's not going to work. And this kind of Daryl Hanamoto, I believe, professor at UCLA, he said that they're trying to make everyone yellow. And I think that's a part of the plan right now to make Asian. So it's definitely a Trojan. So when everybody says I'm Asian American, it's one step towards what you say is the Hapaborean thing. So when you're Asian, you don't speak your mother language. You're not speaking Chinese and Korean. You're speaking English and you're writing and thinking English. So if somebody's on X and they're writing, all the white men, they just ruled over our countries. We got to go back to communist imperialism written by like Lacan and Deleuze, who are basically French, but, we still hate white people. You can't even translate this in Chinese and Japanese. It just will not go. And you tried it and it just doesn't work because this is where the resent is. And this is like number one ideal of an Asian studies major. An Asian studies major isn't just like managerializing the world so we're all the same and whitewashing the world. I think being Asian is the new psyop to be Eurasian. It's kind of like if you believe in bipolars, you can either be white or Asian, right? So some of the most hardcore Wignats will say, well, your half Korean kid is going to be okay if he lives in Korea, but it's not my responsibility because there's only white and Asian. They just can't imagine the third position. This is where the weird part. So when you say Hapaborean, I say Asian Aryanism, it's relatively all the same thing because what's happening is there's this Wasian thing that there's this consensus. And, some people, when you say Eurasian, they think you're talking about Alexander Dugin. I get that a lot. As much as I like Dugin, I know some people, he's like a Jewish satanic anti-white. I don't care. He's just bricks Jason Giorgiani, right? Giorgiani's like a G7 Dugin, if you think that way. So bricks Giorgiani or Dugin is saying, Eurasian mission, whatever. But that's just for like Russians. But it is relatively somewhat the same. But if the technical definition is Eurasian and Asian. So you have to use that words regardless of Dugin branding. And, you could use Wasian, but it's just a positive form of HAPA. So they really made the psyops an Orwellian language to make sure we don't use it. And I think ultimately what I'm just trying to say is that where is this third position going to go? Because if it's going to take 10 or 20 years, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Let's do devil's advocate here and say all the Eurasians are school shooters and porn actors. Well, okay, sure. Let's make the new Vice sex magazine and celebrate this new punk counterculture and let all the Jewish liberal elites give us money to say how bad Eurasians have it. Where is it? Or is that a psyop to demonize and damage and to make everyone black? Well, then we go back to black nationalism and what Tom Sowell is saying about what is the black identity if it's nothing more than a dysgenic, high polygamous, monkey society that we're trying to move away, because transhumanism knows, and I guess to end it real quick, if Jeffrey Epstein is writing an email and saying, oh, well, I think all Black Americans should have a brain chip in their head so they won't rob a store, that shows you what they're thinking. So, yeah.
And I do want to get into the whole sort of Orwellian use of language. And I don't know if you would agree with this, but I kind of see Wasian as a bit of a psyop as well. Because generally, I think the whole Wasian usage of that particular word, at least in my observation, because I grew up in California, so I would say I've probably been around the most Wasian communities that you'd have in the United States. And there was always this idea of using Wasian alongside another form of minority. It was always, I'm not white, essentially. And it was always trying to essentially associate with the sort of leftist bloc of non-white politically asserting themselves in something of a sort of victimhood mindset that you saw with the Stop Asian Hate. And of course, they found out who are the people doing the Asian hate. Well, they're all Black. And they tried to come up with these COPE studies. There was this worst COPE study. You might have read this because you're in this sphere, but it was this Asian woman, and she used 14 studies of hate crimes, and she was like, "Oh, only 2 out of 14 of them were Black." But then it turned out that she used a very, very specific metric for hate crime, where there had to be like a specific racial slur used. So she only applied it to white people. Meanwhile, there was like hundreds of cases, right, of Black people attacking generally older Asian women. But when I think of the word Wasian, it does have a certain passive application in terms of just how it sounds and just how it's generally used. When you think of the Wasian person, you think of this generally passive, soft-spoken, liberal, half-white, half-Asian person. And I think that there is this more sort of masculine attachment to the word Hapa, and then by extension, of course, Hapaborean. And I think that it's kind of what you're alluding to, where I feel that a lot of the application of identity to half Asian, half white people is generally to subsume them into this general larger brown, Black sort of conception of race, which inadvertently goes to either leftism or more extreme forms of leftism. And to me, the word Hapa, and then by extension Hapaborean, well, of course, it's a play on word of Hyperborean. It's intrinsically more right-wing, intrinsically more masculine-oriented, intrinsically more active and aggressive. And I really like the word because I feel that just by saying the Borean part, you're clearly sort of tying yourself into a lot of this. Sometimes it's very memey and LARPy, but the sort of esoteric, Wignat, Hyperborean stuff. But I think there is an importance to it in the fact that it is positing a racial consciousness in the way that Wasian just is trying to subsume you to the left, the sort of left brown bloc. And I think this is why our destiny is intrinsically tied to white people, because they're the ones who are at risk of all this. They're the ones who actually want to maintain a positive identity, whereas I don't really see any true positive identity in all these different global South races. Really, they're not trying to push their own race. They're trying to be one giant blob. And of course, I think that, like I said, I think that the destiny of the Hapa inextricably is linked to whites, and then specifically whites on the dissident right. And I do want to get your thoughts on that, because I think there's this balancing act that we have to play where clearly we don't want to cuck ourselves to white identity. Clearly we're something entirely different. But at the same time, I think there's something to be said about we have to make the case to Wignats or Wignat adjacents and say, hey, you kind of need us. We kind of need to work together because we both generally have a similar goal, which is the preservation of a higher aesthetic of beauty, so on and so forth. So maybe you have some disagreements or slight changes, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on that general gist.
Sure. Well, I've been in California myself. I have family over there, and I'm unfortunately in the Bay Area. It's not like I went to the Bay Area because elitism, but it's just connections, right? It's just there. And I lived in Japantown for many years. And I know what you're talking about, this kind of ideal or the premise of what's left of Japanese Americans or Korean Americans, or whatever, Filipino in Daly City. It's just, what do you call yourself? Is it Asian American, or do you say you're brown? And there seems to be this, I think that's a projection by some of the white boomers who, in a country that was 95% whites, blacks were considered, the premise or the ideal that that was the first group that should be liberated. And it happened. And there was this emphasis that they were just like white people. And I think that ran around the 80s and 90s until the 2000s, that white privilege came about. And I think that is a code for the equity state. In other words, this is something American Renaissance hits home all the time, is that the equity state is basically whites will be disabled to make all the other non-whites be race realist, but at the same time rely on money white people make. And you're pretty much in a system where if you're not white but act white, it's your golden age, which is the weird transracialist part, which I find really strange. And so we're kind of stuck in that. You're playing referees to a game you don't want to play. And this is actually, there's this Wasian identity crisis that, if you have Gen X parents like that, they're going to say some pretty weird stuff around that. I remember there was a guy from the Bay Area, Michael Asutska. He had a book called Libertarianism Without Inequality, which, assuming is libertarianism, is naturally unequal. So to kind of Trojanize and take the basis of ethno-nationalist thinking, libertarianism, and say, well, we want to make it more equal. So does this language become a Trojan to make ethno-nationalism better, or does it become more like, no, we have to have equity? These people have to be the referees and make everyone the same, and just enough so we have a white picket fence so we don't talk to one another. And it's this kind of weird, no fusion, no hybridization. It's just you're kind of playing dumb with the elephant in the room, and seeing the weird signifiers of what there is. There was another academic by name of Lisa Nakamura, another Japanese. I don't know why with these Japanese. She wrote something about internet identities, saying that with the internet, the person who is, half white can now take on whatever they feel like. And just like with our designer baby argument, it seems like they're really relying on technology to support this weird AI singularity techno state where we all get something. But the problem is, and you know this too, and you probably, you've seen Nick Land recently. Nick Land is knowing and going against this, realizing, yes, the singularity, transhumanism, accelerationism, these are like science fiction concepts, but they're becoming the aspect of you cannot have an argument of critical theory or post-Marxism without talking about the inevitable of transracialism, transgenderism, which is a part of the transhumanist branch, and seeing what's happening with technology and machines, right? So, if you're the most inherent anti-capitalist, you realize that technology will bring about post-scarcity to make this kind of form of pseudo-communism to happen. And yet that communism isn't based or racialist like Haas and Eddie's talking about, that you're just going to be white nationalist and still have your communism. No, it's going to be this lazy kind of stay at home, go in the pods type of ordeal where we have no community. Like if you go outside the San Francisco airport, they are flying trans flags over there, right? And this isn't just like, oh, we got to be nice to men who want to be women. No, this is like a signal by the United States government to say we're ready to leave the body to become whatever we would like to be. So this downplays and deconstructs actual signified identities, which becomes so apparent. So I remember I was getting an argument with somebody, one of these right-wing sales takers on X. They make a half-truth argument, and they post a picture of an anime girl, and I'm saying, over a black girl, and they're like, I'm this white and more prettier than you. I'm like, no, that's an anime girl. That's not made by white people. And they're like, no, she has blonde hair and blue eyes, but it's by a Japanese person. No, but this is something they relied on us. And so you're ignoring the aesthetic of the Japanese art in favor of what you want white beauty to be. And if white beauty means being anime realist, all white women should be anime girls, then it's assuming that the Marilyn Monroe or these old form of I Dream a Genie white beauties are very niche, very Anglo, and they don't have a place in a hyper internet society. And the most hardcore, they had this thing 10 years ago, anime rights character who posts hentai and anime How could they still read Countercurrents and American Renaissance and yet masturbate to anime girls? That must mean, I coined this term myself, they must be Asian sexuals, right? They used the word homosexual years ago to say, one who is sexually attracted to manly qualities, homos or something. Well, if Asian is becoming this default term, Asian sexual, well, that makes it more in the liberal paradigm, right? And that's why the word fetish comes about. And what does fetish mean? It means to bring power to something. Well, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. It could mean that you believe it's like a deity or something. But then again, they make sure that the definition is like irrational fixation. That's the key word, irrational. Well, this is rational. Desires, all desires are rational. If you've been reading your Jung or Freud, not that you're into the Jewish ideal of the world, let's say you're doing Jung, you realize all desire is rational. All identity politics are desire. Therefore, what I want to envision the world, whether it's black suns and funny funk edits, these are desires I want to live and envision my aesthetics. I mean, I'm kind of making an art school argument here, but the premise is that my desire are rational. A fetish assumes that your desires are irrational and that we have to treat people the same. So, going back to the Wignats, isn't it funny that Wignats will say, "Oh, I can't listen to Pilleater. He has a fetish," even though I would definitely, admire or think of an Aryan woman in a wheat field or look at my white woman as the greatest thing ever. Again, I can't fetishize my own race because I own it, the property thing. I own this because I have a biological right to it. You do not have a biological right over the other, even though, how do you explain colonization? Or like you said, the creation of, Christopher Columbus coming over here, getting with the Native Americans, or evolutionary psychology and geographic movement. And so I think it's really funny is how can somebody say that we're all different and then demands you have a fetish, you should treat everyone the same now in the ideology of the sameness. And again, this is going back to Michael Sutska with his libertarianism without an equality argument, that how could you make libertarianism equal? Or Lisa Nakamura, how can you make everyone equal with technology? It's this, let me see, Alain Benoit ideology of sameness. It seems like it's not left versus right. It's either this ideal of everything's the same versus the difference of it. It's like, Thales with what is water? Everything is water. Well, if everything is water, is God water? Well, if God's water, then there's no holy transcendental ideal of the world. There's nothing greater because everything's water. And this ideal is just reducing everything to the same. So I think that nationalism that we know is just this older form or the next form of liberalism. It just assumes liberalism can only operate if everybody's the same. And that means you have to have the same team players. If Plato is in the agora and we're all talking with bathrobes on about philosophy of the world and Philos is the love of wisdom and friends, then everyone has to be playing the same game. But if somebody's not playing the same game and he's cheating, then he can't participate in the liberal system. I mean, this is the Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance and this works for white nationalists too. If you add the base black guy in the paradox of intolerance and you tolerate him, but then he comes in, he's like, well, I can't tolerate other white guys who are mean to black people. Well, then you tolerate the intolerable, and if enough of him come in, then you just become de-radicalized. And that's what's happening, I think, on X. I think X is a giant de-radicalization platform with people like, what's his name? What's that journalist? Catherine D. and Giant Geo, all alternative literature, all coming back from Dennis Cooper and Sam Pink. Oh, we're my worst boyfriend. Oh, we're just punk rocker guys. We're like we're transgressive. We read Jared Taylor. And then it's just, no, they're making everyone liberal. So everybody has a place to live in New York and LA. And this is the main problem because, again, I was a young radical at one time. I was literally a national socialist. And I mean to say a socialist that believes in race realist tendencies doesn't mean Hitlerian. It's like Strasserism. And that was a majority of socialists before World War II until you've seen this like psyop going on to create this weird equal identity of equity, like I just said. And that's why I'm really, I'll end here, but it's just like, it's this why I'm into like writers like Gabriel Rockhill, who argues that the CIA put a Derrida, Foucault, and Deleuze into positions of power because you took your based racial Maoism and took it away. And I think that's true. I think Gabe Rockhill is absolutely correct on that assessment. And people like Caleb Maupin who are saying that on a very, synthetic left, right? And I'm not saying we should be left, but maybe you could take those terms and say the synthetic right is like dime square, that these are the same elites when Republican families who cater to us, but then the paradox of intolerance comes in. Oh, here comes Pariah the doll. You got to accept Pariah the doll or you hate trans people. And then it works. And I've seen the same de-radicalization happening. So maybe this is a long story short. So what I'm saying is for people who care about Eurasian relationship, Asian male, white male, Asian female, it's not that we are a de-radicalizing Trojan. It's that if you play by the credo of ethno-nationalism, you realize that people are different, but it's this type of human biodiversity. Their ethno-pluralism is very important. And I'm not saying it's like a zoo or something, but I'm saying is you have to have the respectful right of people having their desired politics if you were to continue liberalism. You don't cut things down because of Malthusianism, social Darwinianism, or degrowth, or like Peter Singer applied ethics and secretly kill people like they're already doing now. So that's what I see is what's happening. And I think Eurasianism is just a natural occurrence of just normal everyday white men and some Asian guys out there who are realizing, well, if everything's going to become anime in the future, I can live my best life with this through the technology that and the women I see. Why would I deal with all the irony and meta narratives going on?
So I think I'm following, but I just want to briefly ask, what's the connection in terms of Eurasianism to what you're sort of framing as like the larger thrust of liberalism? Like, are you saying that's kind of an outgrowth of that? Or are you saying that's directly sort of in opposition to that?
Opposition.
Okay, gotcha.
And
Okay, that's what I was hoping.
I was using Mike Blototsko as saying it's the same. Like there are Nakamura and Amatsu is saying, no, Eurasianism is the ideology of sameness. And this was 20 years ago. And I'm saying, no, I'm an anti-liberal. And as an anti-liberal, I think all of liberalism is bad. And I think, and here's your Kevin McDonald for your evolutionary psychology nerds out here. Trust begatted the ideal of an economy, which begatted feudalism, which begatted this ideal of liberalism, which begatted capitalism, which we're now in today. So if you go back to that root, somewhere between feudalism and trust, not that we need trust for society. It's what makes us civilized and makes all society civilized. But liberalism, this ideal that you trust in a collective, that seemed to birth all of our materialistic problems today. There's some people who say, oh, it's all about materialism. That's why we get Marx. No. I think you can have idealism, you can have materialism. It's the ideal of liberalism that allows these ideals where, maybe I'm stretching out the ideal of Alan Bloom's concept of the closing of the American mind, where he says, when you're open and subjective about everything, you eventually close because you're so pretentious about everything. And I've learned this from art school. I went to art school. I'm debt free. I don't have any debt on me. I've learned this in art school, and journalists do this all the time, right? They say, oh, I know what this cool band is, and you should feel bad because you wouldn't know anything about the Native American noise scene in Nevada. It means nothing. It's a type of hyper upper middle class identity of the people in Ohio do not care about. So this is obviously planned and obviously pushing a certain think tank agenda that goes beyond our thing. And that's why, going back to Gabriel Rockhill, there must be something deeper than this. And it's true. Now your normal person is reading the Epstein files. You got your most Democratic leaning person who voted for Biden. He's like, you know what? Trump eats babies and throws them in water. I don't know how true that is, but it sounds like Alex Jones convinced everyone that it's good to be a conspiracy theorist. Okay, then what about the Holocaust? What about Robert Farrason? What about the moon landing? Was that happen? There's some limit. And then that's the questioning. I mean, again, I don't know if they're throwing Epstein files is a totally different thing, but we're in an age now where people are us against the oligarchs, but the oligarchs must mean something about liberalism, right? And I think we're coming to the point where, this is why I like, this moral little niche philosophers like Francois Laurel. He had a concept called non-philosophy. He believed that all philosophy was flawed for the fact that you played a game of philosophy. And you have to go outside of philosophy to have intuition to think what's really going on with philosophy. He was against another guy called Alain Badiou. And Alain Badiou believes in this kind of the actual political guy who's taking from Gramsci and all these thoughts. He's thinking we can have this world communism, the Commonwealth. And, Francois Laurel is this kind of high tech, transhumanist French philosopher who recently died like last year ago. And, his non-philosophy project, it's kind of obscure and esoteric, but it's kind of goes on the premise of my own anti-liberalism. I mean, my own, when I'm saying my influence, right? And I think, whether you're a Duginist or Johnnyist or, the only people who I can think who are proponents of liberalism, honestly, is Richard Spencer. I think Richard Spencer is like an old world liberal who's like, listen, we could still have liberalism, but it has to be our race of people who are accepted. And that's okay. You could still play a game. It's just you're going to have fractured liberalism. It's not practical for a world that is slowly being engulfed by BRICS. I think BRICS, my controversial statement is I believe BRICS in China, half the world, they believe in anti-liberalism because they just don't know what it is. They'll still be for transhumanism. It's just not the same G7 transhumanism of putting like a fat black lesbian on the moon or on Mars, which they want to do. I just think China is like, what are you talking about? That's just not possible. And so, again, I think that's where the discussion is. And to make a long story short, yes, I think the Eurasian identity politic of saying we're all the same, the most hardcore Eurasians from like Andrea Tumine, who's married to a white woman, is like, you know what? I want my children to be Eurasian, and I want them to be with similar Eurasian daughters or other whites or Asians who have, and that's basically shared eugenics at that point. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's just decency. I think even like smart black people know that. It's not to say that, one more note. There's a friend I have named Keymaster Skull 1, and his entire X page has 30,000 followers of black men getting with Asian women and posting about its romanticization and what would that institution be like. It's a funny project. God bless him for doing it. But he's the only guy. It's numbers. There's more numbers of white male, Asian female, and Asian male, white female than there ever would be with black male, white female. According to Pew Research Center, the highest divorce rate is black men and white female. So it's funny is that what makes you think like black men could like stay with Asian women if they can't even get over the white woman struggle? And, Wignats will probably say, oh, well, you couldn't win your own white women, so you got with an Asian woman. Are they going to tell that to a black guy who couldn't even get with LaFonda? I mean, again, but I God blessed Keymaster Skull because he's actually dead set on envisioning a positive aesthetic. What would Blasian Aryanism look like? And I think that's funny because eventually that's going to require writers and Malcolm X type people to see it. And yet it's just a fantasy for now. It's a type of utopianism that doesn't really add up. And this is what I get pinholed in. I'm with Pilleater, you're doing this type of utopianism. But I'm like, listen, what we have on our side is a materialistic, real standard that can be measured with numbers. If the country is 59% white, where did that 30% white from 40 years ago? They assimilated to Asian or Hispanic, and they are doing these things which are, it's not like a Wakanda is going to be made tomorrow, right? It's still very small, black male, Asian female. And I'm not saying that should grow or explode or that we should have war with them. But I'm saying in that science fiction scenario, you shouldn't be saying we're all the same, because Keymaster Skull 1 realizes that I want to be different. I don't like being black. I have a self-guilt black complex. I'd rather be Asian. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm being a transracialist here or whatnot, but it's the ideal of possible worlds, and you got to think of these conflicts all the time.
Yeah, I mean, would not be my project, but I guess if I was born black and Asian, I would kind of have to support some sort of racial consciousness. So I can't hate on it. It's kind of the same thing with the Jews. Like these Wignats, they can't realize, oh no, the Jews are looking out for their interests. Well, no shit, they're looking out for their interests. Wouldn't you if you were Jewish? And it's just, so, from that perspective, I can empathize, though I myself, of course, might even be in opposition to that. I've never seen an attractive Blasian woman, I don't think.
Well, I mean, I dated one when I was 23. She was a coolie, which is basically means from Jamaica. So there was coolies, which were basically Jamaican dads, Chinese moms, or Chinese dads and Jamaican moms, and they were actually the merchant class because they had high IQ. And then the Jamaicans, who are against race mixing, kicked them out, and they all moved to the Bronx. And then she's going to University of Penn and being whitewashed. And here's the thing: eugenics comes in again. What do you think the Blasian girl wants to be with? A white guy or an Asian guy? So it works out. It's not like your kids might be like quarter Afro and somewhere in there, but it's not an argument to say it's the Kalergi plan, right? And that's just a lot of people trip up on the Kalergi plan stuff. So
yeah, I think the interesting thing though is it kind of goes back to your anime argument. Well, if you're trying to circumvent getting to a certain aesthetic, why not sort of catapult yourself to that aesthetic? So it makes me wonder, once all this like transhumanism, CRISPR stuff, whatever the fuck, I mean, does the black person want to just jumpstart the process and have his offspring essentially become white faster than naturally, right? And if that's the case, and this is why I think the HAPA aesthetic is superior to a lot of this other stuff, is that we do want HAPA women. We find them attractive. People don't find Blasian, generally speaking. I'm not saying
that's right.
Right. So what it means is that you can see in a transhumanist future, nobody's going to want to be black because clearly they want to.
You got it. And then add the pseudo-Marxist argument in here, and if everything's based on supply and demand ratios, people are not lining up to marry Blasian women. People are not lining up. That's a black woman issue. Black women will have to compete with other whites and Asians to get the attention. And this goes with the argument of, if you're reading like classic, I think F. Rodger Devlin, alpha male, even Vox Day. I think Vox Day made up the terms alpha, beta, delta, which then exploded into that MGTOW dating Rouge V scene. Cherteau Hartis, and this ideal, the premise is that, if you have one alpha male, then everyone goes to him and there's a problem. And that's what Funny r/HAPA argues. It's like they want to deny race, and yet they also want to believe men and women are different. But then the supply and demand cycles come out. And so this is why, if you're an anti-liberal, you have to believe on the premise that race is real. We have racial different realities, that men and women are different. And I've added some other things too, that work is a reality, that we work every day, whatever, we can't define work. In fact, you could say all of socialism and Marxism is about how we deal with work. Violence, you know this too, like if you go to the gym every day, you are manifesting some form of violence so you can like kill someone, and that's a good thing, right? It's just we're taking our primal instincts not to be a silverback gorilla and to be a boxer or an athlete, which is really strong. I would say it's a whole, but it's a part of that. And just the space we inhabit, you couldn't do that in like Alaska. If it's like really cold, like it's geography. Like if you're in Africa, it's gonna be really hot. And so it changes the way you think about the world. The Bay Area never snows. It never rains. It's always good. The weather's outside. Unlike Pennsylvania, it snows constantly. And that changes the way you think about the world. And I think these are, biological realities, and like no one has ever made intellectual premises on these like evolutionary psychology things. People flirt with it, but that's so how much of liberalism is about saying we're all the same. And I find it concerning because they don't want to look at art differently. And I always been an artist myself, and that's always like my I don't think you can be apolitical because you need to have philosophy in what you do. Philosophy is the highest virtue, and it comes through everything you express, and people know that in arts forms. And so you need to have other smart people to understand what you're talking about, because dumb people are not going to get its lower forms. And so this is the problem, is that when you show someone an interesting piece of work, art, music, film, and they just don't get it, and they're like, well, why does it matter? I don't want to think that way. Alvin Plantinga, a Christian philosopher, once said that philosophy was when you think about something really hard, and that your main muscle, if you're in the gym and you lift weights, your main muscle is that's you're using your arms and your feet. Well, a philosopher uses its brain to think. And as long as you can think about crazy stuff like I'm doing, like Keymaster Skull 1 and all possible paradoxes, well, that's no different than a fighter dodging hits constantly and being aware of it. Most people can't do that. They'll go on the ground and whatever. So what determines a great philosopher and lover of wisdom is thinking about all possible outcomes. And that's what it's about. And if you can't think, and they say you're overthinking, that's crazy. Well, then that's the problem is that, well, why do you think people write in the English language on digital formats or blogs or Substacks or books? It's because they're thinking about something, whether, however they put their English language. It doesn't have to be creative. It could be historical, document, news, whatever. Mechanical. AI is so great because AI can really shorten the process for you. But it gets to the point. But yeah, I think people don't want to think. I think people are ideologues, which can be a good thing. It's just like a new form of religion. If the old world failed and it literally is this bowling alone, Charles Putnam situation where we don't have a 90% white country, you have to make the best of it in a post-capitalist society where you're not going to go to return to the land in Arkansas and you have your white nationalist hut over there, which, go do it. I'm not saying you can't, but it seems like you're playing the game of what the system already offers when really it's closing down on us. There's going to be some Sorelian violence happening. If they told normal people to get mad over George Floyd, or you're going to see a lot of that happen over other minuscule things as well. And I think the happiness index in America is very, very low right now. People are not getting money. They're not producing wealth. They're getting mad over stupid shit and saying words. Nobody's building bridges. And the normie class can't. This is what happens when you don't think. When you don't think, you watch boring shit on TikTok and the TV, and you get bad opinions of stupid girls who pretend to read Lacan, but they don't. And this is why you have to be original now and go out there, because I've already had people now, gang stalkers and feds on me, who are like, oh, this guy's a pedophile. This guy rapes kids. I can tell he rapes kids. You notice that? They call everyone they don't like a pedophile. I notice it's really weird. And then you make a public statement, you're not a pedophile, then they double down and call you a pedophile. They think I have a basement of kids I rape in the basement. It's insane. And I think pedophile panic only came about because you can't debunk National Socialism anymore. Like there was Godwin's law, where basically you argued and say, well, if you can't win the argument, you just call him a Hitler lover, right? You call him Hitler's the worst thing ever. Well, if Hitler's right and National Socialism has some rationalism to it, then therefore you must be more evil. You must be like torturing and killing kids and like, and if you talk about it, then that means which is absurd. It's a guilt by association fallacy. But yeah, it's just we're in some strange times where I think there's literally people doing reports on us in group chats. There are accounts that say they do this, but they're not. I think there's Indian accounts from India who say they're pro-Japan, they're Japanese nationalist, only then to. So what's the point of that? Was it really for money? Or was it for a point to say, like, if somebody goes on Twitter and they're like, I would destroy Japanese society if I see another Eurasian. And it turns out an Indian's writing that. What is the psychoanalysis? Is it because he's jealous? The Indian man's jealous he can't get a Japanese wife? Well, it sounds like it is, and he's role-playing as a Japanese nationalist. So how many other gay people are role-playing as white nationalists to get their view across? A lot. And so that's always been fascinating me for the last 15 years. And if you're not into politics, you should.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say, and I knew there'd be a lot to talk about having you on. But I'm sort of reminded, because I want to go back just a little bit to what you're talking about, the Pariah the Doll types and the dime square kind of grifter spaces into the dissident right. And it's almost, as you say, that liberalism is trying to reassert itself into these spaces subversively to sort of control the narrative. And, I think we both have an interest in Bataille. And it seems like the homogenous society is trying to get the heterogeneous elements back into its fold and be able to sort of take away that transgressive element and sort of utilitize it. Because if you can utilize transgression, it ceases to be transgression. You see this with the JQ. You see this with even, I would say, Nick Fuentes is like the Disneyfication of Hitler. Oh, Hitler actually was a lovable chud. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He loved black people, right? He loved Palestine. He believed in free Palestine. I wouldn't be surprised if all these different figures are being propped up by the kind of liberal institution to utilitize the transgression, which is Hitler, to utilitize the transgression, which is the JQ. Because now it's like you can talk about the Jews on YouTube. You're not going to get demonetized. You'll probably get algo boosted. And there's something to say is maybe Jewish people have funded the Fuentes types, because it's like, holy shit, they're turning everyone into Philo-Semites. Because like I find myself, even in that whole branch sometimes. So the homogeneous element of society is sort of reasserting itself onto all the transgressive elements, onto all the fringe communities, and sort of reappropriating them. So it's very interesting, and I do want to get your thoughts on that. But more so, there's a lot of things that I wanted to discuss from what you brought up, particularly China, because I think China is very interesting. I think it's interesting in the whole Nick Land AI conversation too, because they are an outlier to a lot of the sort of predictions of where AI is going to go, of where capitalist society is going to go. I think China is the big outlier, and I brought this up at dinner with Nick Land. Of course, there's all these different AI developers, big AI developers, by the way, right, who are there, and very much are sort of bought into this Sam Altman, or we're gonna save the world, give us more money, pump more money into us, because obviously the AI bubble is about to burst. I think we'll see, and I think China is the big outlier, because what we see with this sort of view of AI is like the culmination of capital. Of course, Nick Land says capitalism is AI. And what essentially it's saying, I think it goes back to Baudrillard's system of objects, that all these desires that we have are going to be derivative of the system of capitalism. There's no reference to the real anymore. The subject has been subordinated to capital. And we see China, and we see something different. We see that capital is subordinated to the subject with the CCP and Xi Jinping. You have the economic class bowing down to the political class. You could be fucking Jack Ma and go disappear for 6 months, because the economic doesn't have subordination of the political. The political is still at the forefront of society. Therefore, the subject, the human subject, is not restrained by the system of objects in the Baudrillardian sense, the way that I think liberal society is, right? And maybe that's the whole tension with G7 versus BRICS. And what I'm getting at here, and it may not make sense for the viewer, but what I'm trying to sort of illustrate is, first of all, noting the trajectory of capitalism in its relationship to identity. Why do they not want a Hapaborean identity? Okay, well, it's quite obvious. The same reason they're very afraid of BRICS nations. And of course, look, I'm an American patriot. If we go to war with China, I'm going to go fucking kill some of them too. But I think that we have to learn from the Chinese. We have to learn from their corporatist economic model that really is reaffirming human agency over the process of capitalism, and by extension AI, and saying, well, the reason why they don't want us to have an identity is because they want us to be subordinated to this sort of liberal system of objects. They want us to be subordinated to that process. And if you have a positive identity, that's a reassertion of symbolic value in terms of your racial consciousness that just doesn't work in the liberal system. It's like you said, they want to make everyone the same. If you make everyone the same, you could sort of see capitalism being able to subsume all these different drives within, like, again, it goes back to Baudrillard, that system of objects, rather than this sort of, I don't want to say a return because I'm not conservative, but maybe a reassertion of some form of fantasy in which symbolic value sort of takes the forefront of identity and of the trajectory of the human subject. So I think, like, you can really tie capitalism, AI into this whole discussion, into why they don't want the positive Hapa identity. And I do want to get your thoughts, but I do want to bring up Gooner Accelerationism at some point, because I feel like it relates to a lot of this, the anime conversation, the conversation regarding sexuality in the future, and maybe even a white pill for the select few cognitive elite who could sort of make it out of the malaise. But on this general topics, are you kind of seeing a similar relationship with China and capitalism and AI, where maybe the only path forward in terms of reasserting the human subject is something approximating what China is doing contra this liberal system, which sort of just feeds into itself?
Right, a lot to think about there. Because again, it seems like the Cold War never ended, and it's really just Russia became China, and yet all of capitalism relies on China's production since Deng Xiaoping, meaning to be glorious is to be wealthy, even if you have to use a capitalist system under a socialist working. And I do believe some of the old boomer and Gen Xers think, what defines us in G7 is that we support liberal capitalism and you could be whatever you want. So we're showing the world, if you move here, you could be whitewashed. You don't have to be. And that's the selling point. I don't think the selling point's working anymore. And that's the problem there. And so for China, I think that project was supposed to be Taiwan. Taiwan was this idealized country, which was supposed to be all of China, that you could be liberal in Taiwan. It would be like Tokyo, but owned by Chinese. I don't think that project ever worked. I think the number is small. It was too condensed. And if you look at Taiwan today, they're showing their colors where they have gay pride parades and adult industry about and other things, which are all because we're free, right? Even if you go to New York or even SF, there's a Taiwan town, or I'm Taiwanese. I don't know what you're talking about. Some Chinese person at the Whitney is like, I'm not Chinese, I'm Taiwanese. And that seems to be very popular right now, because if you want to argue if that's an identity or not, it's like Okinawan or Kinawa or something. I don't know. But it reminds me, speaking about whether Jews, and this goes with going back to the race thing. A lot of the main arguments among race realists is that, things would be better if we just got rid of Jews and we freeze the Jews out. So the reason why capitalism is so bad is because we just have Jews there. So we get rid of the Jews, we could still have capitalism and it'll work functionally, because then profit goes with virtue. And that means capitalism must work. And this kind of weird anti-Jewish doesn't solve the real problem, because it seems like the reason why we had Marx was because there were hardly any Jews in Germany. I mean, you could get in arguments about this, and that even in totally white societies with capitalism, it still harmed its people. So that's why we get Scandinavian socialism and things like that. So in a way, I argue and say if we had pagan societies, pre-Christian notions, those are pre-socialist or like socialist in form. The ideal, you could be in was Ambler, Pennsylvania, and just have a food cooperative there and an art gallery and jobs all lined up. It is a type of socialism. It's just all white. And I think that is a cultural thing. And so, go back on the Jewish thing. One of my friends, she goes by the name Sanjay Hora. She was like a Hegelian e-girl, whatever you want to call that. Nikki, the Hegelian, that trio. She has this ideal that, like, listen, no, it's going to be Jewish Eurasianism. All the Jewish guys are going to get with Asian girls because they're own Jewish women. And I'm like, I was telling her, listen, it's about numbers. It's not about the positions of power you have, because only one Jewish guy. But remember, in Jewish religion, if you get a tattoo, you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Or if you marry out of line, she's not Jewish, you can't continue on the Jewish blood. You're going to have to do some wraparound saying the Chinese woman is Jewish. But then that seems to me that the most hardcore Jewish women, they're just going to go over to the white guys. And this is what, my friend Robert Stark says, that a lot of the Orson Welles types from Wisconsin, they all moved to the Los Angeles area and they all married Jewish women because they were there and they were smart, and that's why they were able to hold that. So again, I think that this whole Sanjay Hora argument that, you just put the Jews together and let them assimilate, it's not going to work, because Jews are particularly strict on who is allowed in, because it's one with the religion type. So to say whether capitalism is that religion, I don't think it is. I just think it's a type of technology. I think you can move away from the Jews who have power, the Epstein Island types, and you could still go into the future while you could still have the state of Israel. That's why the most hardcore white nationalist is a supporter of Israel. That's why it's kind of this weird post-Trotskyist neoconservatism where they're saying, well, I support the state of Israel not because I'm in favor of a Jewish elite. I support the state of Israel because if everyone had their own room, Jews could just go here and not put our tentacles into other works, right? And that's why we'd have the Jewish Californias and all that stuff, or one Jewish neighborhood in New York. So I would just say is whether you consider, even E. Michael Jones might put this out. He thinks that when Jews made up capitalism because it's a form of usury, which then, distorts Adam Smith's ideal of the wealth of nations and getting more for what you have, it's a half truth. And I really don't think you can boil down these things to just exact eco biology things. You can say that there are certain systems that were just old world ideals of it. So this brings me into China. It's like in China, they've always been Confucius and always been Taoist. Well, they took communism and just deprogrammed it to take the values they liked from this ideal that we all win together. Well, that sounds like a race of people. That sounds like National Socialism, or the ideal that you shouldn't be, the proletariat is the common Chinese person in the mountainside. That sounds like something you would find in Taoism, right? And so I think, it isn't, I remember going with this other Wignat on X, and he's like, Sidney Rittenberg, he made China communist. I'm like, it's just one Jewish guy that went over there thinking he would be pathologically altruistic to change it around. He's such a minor influence, right? There is this kind of fearing that one Jewish drop makes everything crazy. It's why people think I'm a Jew. I'm not a Jew. I just joke and troll people thinking that way because people want to believe whatever they want to believe. And so I think, the American way of this Puritan ethic Christianity of, supposedly virtue is aligned with profit, it's just not there anymore. And things are just going to be state mandated where they're going to force you to do things. And again, this is where the whole liberals get upset. I don't want to drive the bus. Well, they're going to have the jobs there for you to promise economic security. And so then it's the point of UBI, right? And that's why Andrew Yang's UBI is probably going to, be in place, because they realize everyone's redundant and they don't know what to do with people. So everybody's just going to be on welfare to create a huge consumer market, and you don't produce anything. It's just making sure the people who have profit continue on that promise. And, my solution thing is people are just going to naturally day trade. They're naturally just going to open up Thinkorswim or like Fidelity or Day Trader Pro or whatever, and just be like, I'm just going to put a put or a call on QQQ and a SPY, and then they put down $600 and they get $3,000 in just an hour. And then they're going to realize, oh, it only took a click of the button. Why would I ever DoorDash again? Why would I do that? And so they're going to make a system like that where these types of socialism are going to be, promised by capitalism. And I think this is the problem, is that liberalism is not free because you're on LinkedIn or Craigslist looking for jobs. It's only going to be promised when people have a party to belong with. And we're so divided under liberalism that we're all unique individuals and yet we're supposedly all the same. And that's the irony of it all. You have to create some level forms of economic security to promote your difference. But it's egalitarianism. Egalitarianism, not because we're all the same, but equal access to the pot of money to take. And that's kind of this post-scarcity thing. We have equal access to the pot, but we're still different. It's almost like equity is getting inversed on itself. We're not working and paying our tax dollars for blacks or trans people. The singularity has now paid for it. We're all day trading and we're all pressing buttons. And now we don't have to do anything because we realize, yes, the economy is fake and gay. But other than that, I would say China represents that on a large scale because they just make and make and make. And that's basically it. The other thing is, so what was the Gooner thing you were talking about? The Gooner thing.
Yeah, well, Gooner Accelerationism,
How would you explain it?
So essentially, in my writing, the idea is that with things like Sora and with AI increasingly being able to operate a mimetic of humans, you're going to have AI girlfriends, virtual pornography that is indiscernible from reality, or so good that you don't care that it's somewhat discernible from reality. So it's kind of this thing of fully automated luxury communism.
That's
right. And you don't even have to day trade anymore, right? Because in a post-scarcity environment,
the AI would do it. Yeah.
Right. So the idea is that people are going to opt out of reality because it's going to be cheaper to just live inside of a Gooner cave or a simulation.
Okay.
So I guess my thesis, and then where I would sort of create a prescriptive or even aesthetic out of that, is that you're going to be able to free up a very small subsection of the population that still wants to be in reality. And I think it becomes really a conflict of the irrational versus the utilitarian. Because rationally, why wouldn't you want to be in the simulation? I mean, you don't have to just goon in the simulation. If you want to be an architect, you could build these sort of great projects in your simulation. You can get anything you want out of the simulation. The only reason you'd want to be a part of reality is because of some irrational desire to be part of the real. But if you do have that sort of drive, and I think that drive is going to be more common amongst Asians, whites, and then some exceptional blacks and exceptional Arabs people. Like the exceptional, but for the most part, the global South is going to be very susceptible to the Gooner pod because they're already living on a lower sustenance level. So once they have access to all these things, they don't have a higher concept of art or culture. So the very best Nigerians maybe will reject the Gooner pods, but it's disproportionately going to affect the global South and brown populations for the most part. So the sort of white pill out of that is the small subsection of the population that actually wants to create art, that actually wants to be part of the construction of higher culture and civilizational building, are going to be freed up in terms of the resources available to them because the majority of the population is going to be living in Gooner pods. So it kind of turns the whole system of objects on its head because you sort of accelerate the ultimate capitalist experience condensed into something that takes up barely any space. And then over time, eugenically, right, these people aren't going to reproduce, these people aren't going to vote. So maybe the problem of democracy is somewhat solved. The problem of dysgenic, not just the fact that we're going to have CRISPR and we're going to have all these transhumanist technologies available to us. Forget about that. You're just going to have that sort of selective breeding for higher qualities because all the people that you don't want in the gene pool are going to be regulated to the Gooner pods. So that's Gooner accelerationism in a nutshell. Yeah. Maybe you have some thoughts.
No, because it does sound right. I would just call it social Darwinianism. They're using it. I mean, E. Michael Jones saying sex is used as a weapon to kill you. And it was just making me think the argument is really about whether sex is a privilege or not. And it seems like pornography in the adult industry is going to be reserved for the elites. It isn't the seedy image of like prostitutes and poor people doing it. It seems like websites like Pornhub and like the adult industry, these are high level end models from like actually Ivy League and rich schools who are debt free with the trust fund. They do porn because they have the power to do it. And this means that the ideal of pornography is a privilege, that you could do it. It's a form of luxury. And masturbating and staying a goon, like you said, the Gooner thing is a lower blue collar fake form. Your AI girlfriend, it's not it's not organic. I'm not buying real coffee with coffee beans. I'm buying a fake coffee, a fake simulacrum of it. And I would just think of, because when I was thinking of Gooner acceleration, I was thinking of sadism, right? Because there seems to be this whole talk about what sadism is and what's not. When you think of sadism, you probably think of a criminal getting high off of hurting someone. And I think that's like a wrong way of viewing it. You could look at sadism as a type of revolutionary thinking, and Jones wrote this too, that the ideal, the premise that if you show a theater full of naked women, people would be more spontaneous to rioting and doing things they wouldn't normally do. If you're in a bar at 2 a.m. and some drunk girl comes along with you, you're more likely to grope her and have sex with her and what they would call date rape or whatever, and you're back at her place or whatever. Do you call that rape or you don't? It seems like the natural biological urge to have sex with somebody and to procreate and have kids is then kind of blocked in favor of hookup culture, which I don't think is real. And the premise is that it seems like as we're approaching this incel phenomenon and people are sexless and not getting with women, or instead of thinking about involuntary celibate, we should be thinking of like involuntary promiscuous. What if you get sex but you don't promise a loyal girlfriend, a loyal wife, someone to procreate, someone to have children? Everybody's judging about what your wife looks like. That's not what you should be doing. That's not a manifestation, and that's as fictitious as what love is supposed to be, which, whether it's Christian related or the ideal of virtue and giving yourself away to someone something doesn't, like Lacan would say. And people have lost that because now they say you're gay or something. And this is why the most gayest person hates women, because the gay person says, well, at least I can talk to someone who's just like me. Right. But it's like, well, that destroys the point of our biological urge to have sex with women, have children, and have a family and legacy. And so going back on the Gooner accelerationism, I think what people are not looking at is the porn industry. People say, I can't look at porn, that's degenerate. You ever look at the actors and actresses and who's a part of and who's following who? It gets really strange. I've met some weird adult industry types people, and they're very, I would say, raped by like actual Jewish Like we're talking about weird Jewish, like Epstein related people. People think, oh, that's no, it's true. There's like Jewish bosses and there's like weird gangster mafioso people who have a political correct face. And sometimes the porn that is being watched is rather a tape of not just luxury, but a reflection of their abuse. And maybe me reading Andrea Dworkin, a fat, Jewish lady, but other than Andrea Dworkin, I think Andrea Dworkin's legitimate because you watch and it's a manifestation of this violence or abuse play, and you see it, and it's more like, well, there is the film that tells you about this world of intimacy and love, but not exactly what's really going on where they're acting. Oh, I'm just doing a job, and well, it's not really a job. It's what they've been abused, and so we see that in porn. I could put it this way. Think about in Greek philosophy where Socrates pulls away Alcibiades from a bed and he's having sex with a beautiful woman. I can't recall her name. And Socrates is like, what are you doing having sex with this woman? You got to learn about what it means to know about the world and whatever. And then Alcibiades is like, why is this old man like killing my boner and my ejaculation? What are you doing to me? I'm like, no, because there's more to life than having sex with women and doing cuddle parties every day. You got to go outside and learn about the world. And there's a painting by Jean Rembrandt. It begins with an R. It's not Kane, but if you write, I think the painting's called Socrates tears Alcibiades from the bed of sensual pleasures. It's in the It's in Chicago at the Chicago Art Museum. I think it's a great image because it shows you that struggle of what philosophy is. In Alcibiades 1, where Socrates talks to Alcibiades, and Alcibiades says, "Listen, I've worked out. I have a body. I'm very strong. I can command an army. What are you saying that I can't control the world?" And I'm like, and then Plato goes, and in Latin, he's like, well, you do not know what the love of wisdom is. You do not know that there's more to life. You have these materialistic understandings of what love is. And some people say in Alcibiades 1, this is where philosophy comes from. It's really weird. In Latin philos, it comes from this, the love of wisdom. But the reason why I say this little digression, this little story, is because this is like what porn is. A lot of those people are just the Alcibiades types, having sex, having fun. We watch, Marika Hasey bang another white strong dude, whatever. We imagine ourselves, go to adult conventions, see her. But what is her life? Is her life just about sex? It must be more, and she's been taken away from that. I have a biography of Lucky Star in my room. I haven't read it yet. And this Filipino porn actress saying she's trying to find love in this world. I'm like, okay, but you're still having sex with Jewish guys and black guys. That's Plato taking you, or no, Socrates taking you from the bed. Plato's writing about this. Socrates taking you from the bed of sensual pleasures to understand that philosophy isn't the sensual, but something more, in understanding that. And I think a lot of people who watch porn realize that there must be something more here and not being. And to make a long story short, I think when you talk about the Gooner cave, we can use that and say you don't want to leave the bed of sensual pleasures. And this could even be said about gay people having, and I don't know if you follow Joseph Chambra. He's like a Jay Dyer guy. He was like a gay porn actor turned Christian. He's like, listen, how to stop having gay sex, realize that you're just hurting yourself. And gay sex is nothing more than you not getting your psychological needs met and you falling for addiction and all this rape and cutting and all this shit. So I don't know, maybe I'm going way out in the deep end here, but you see a current trend here. And I think in Gooner Accelerationism, it is a cave. It is Plato's cave. They don't want to leave the cave. And then when they leave the cave and they learn there's more intimacy, and if they found what virtue is and they give themselves to a person who wasn't ready, then they can have a wife and have kids and realize they don't need anyone else. I mean, I'm at that stage in life, but I think a lot of people don't understand that.
I want to add a caveat to it to separate what you're talking about with your the sort of sensual, sexual, like porn kind of thing, and then like the erotic, because I think there's an important distinction to make. Where Bataille talks about, like, for example,
Right.
We got to go to Bataille, right? But I mean, like, for example, Bataille would probably be against gay marriage. He would probably be against you said it doesn't exist, but like colloquially hookup culture. Like Bataille would see free love and libertine sexuality. I mean, he wrote about it. He said libertine sexuality is not what I'm advocating. And why is he not advocating for this? Is because it precisely gets rid of the erotic element of sexuality when there isn't the shame or the necessity for transgression in it. So I think there's a distinction, right, in something like pornography, again, which is this instrumentalized, utilitized commodification of the erotic. It's sex reduced to just the base stimuli, which is the orgasm.
That's why you can't work in sex. They say, oh, I'm a
Right.
sex worker. It's impossible. We mean we breathe. I'm a breathe worker. And that's the whole point. Right.
Totally. Right. So what I'm getting at is I think it's an important distinction to make between, well, what is the archetype of the gooner or even the archetype of the person making the porn? And then there's the archetype of the erotic just totally above that. And I think that fundamental to all these things is the fact that we've sort of gotten rid of sexiness. That sounds kind of gay, but we've got rid of true sexuality. We're both hypersexual and sexualist at the same time. There's nothing sexual to me about pornography or gooning or whatever, because it's the commodification of the necessity for shame, the necessity for that disgust. Like the disgust, there's a little bit of disgust involved with sex. And of course, this is the role of the taboo to Bataille in sexuality. That's necessary for, I think, a more maybe even a more philosophical experience of sexuality that would, I think, be more in line to what Plato's talking about. Because in the Symposium, for instance, right, he talks about Hercules' lover, which is presumed to be a male. Well, clearly this is very different from just the homosexuality you see today. That's not what they're talking about, right? They're talking about the ideal of love. And of course, there's some disagreements whether that's an actual lover or if that's more like a masculine friend lover, right? But then love and sexuality, I think, portrayed completely differently because there is a shame to it. There is this sort of restrictive element which is necessary for that higher experience and higher pleasure of it that's just taken away with porn and the gooner. The gooner is, right, it's the commodification of sexuality to the base stimuli, essentially utilitizing it so that the orgasm is all there is. And I think what's interesting what you're saying about getting Alcibiades out of the bed, right, is I think it's, to me, and maybe you disagree with this, it's less so about sex itself, but it's more so about what sex has become and how sex can be stripped away from the erotic element, where I think there can be an erotic experience of philosophy that is quite affirmative, in which the sensual and the love of wisdom sort of mold together. And one thing I was talking about actually with my dad is a lot of men can't commit to a relationship because they want to be philanderers their whole life. They don't want to settle down with a woman. And I told him, I said, of course there's always that impulse, right, to want to bang as many women as possible. But I think what I was saying is, like, for me personally, right, being in a relationship, philosophy has kind of been my transgressive lover in a sense. Like, I don't want to be a philanderer because I have something else to direct my time towards. It's philosophy. So it's almost like, I mean, I don't know if you've read. This is one of Giorgiani's newer books, but I think it was Metapolemos. At the end of Metapolemos, he essentially says you got to let wisdom brain fuck you and gorge its tentacles into you and mind fuck you. So, I mean, maybe you disagree, but I think that it's also important to distinguish what sex has become. And I think you're right in the sense that we don't have hookup culture, in the sense that people just aren't having sex anymore. I mean, statistically, this is the case. They're not. And that's a problem, because I think it's not necessarily the act of sex, but it's the way that we sort of reframe sexuality in society to just make it completely meaningless. And in reality, I mean, sex is sexless to a certain extent. And I think fundamental to the struggle of any higher cognitive elite that eugenically selects itself through the Gooner acceleration, it's going to necessitate an understanding of what you're saying, being Socrates pulling Alcibiades out of the goon cave, so to speak. With Plato's goon cave, I got to do an article on that. Plato's goon cave.
Yeah, just use that and look at the art.
Yeah. Right.
Well,
but I mean, I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it this way. It's kind of like you are what you eat, right? You kind of have a weird feeling that if you're a porn actress and you look at the man who's penetrating her, you become that man. The person owns you. So, you watch Lulu Chu and black guys are on her. Okay, she is spiritually black. As much as she'd like to say, I'm a white lesbian in an Asian body and I have sex with black men. Well, what does that make you? It makes you black. I know it's a weird argument, but the point is, who you allow is what you are. And you can't escape that after that, because you've reduced your sexual market value to such a lower form of being black. So if a black guy can get it, why not a higher form can get it? I think this is like what you're saying with the eroticism. Well, I guess this is why there's Key to Love, where she's making videos of I play Magic the Gathering with my nerdy white boyfriend, and then he's doing crazy sex, or now I'm a human resource teacher and he's having sex with me after being PC. I don't know. It's that weird 1970s porno dialogue that maybe it's class based. Maybe the actress is basically projecting how she felt in a subculture that was unexplained. And again, that's different between a spiritually black subculture, which Wignats will call degenerate, and rightfully so, and I would too, and versus a higher end subculture of the woman using porn to express herself in that way. But again, here's my fallacy. I don't think it's a form of liberation. I do think it's a form of cutting the body, like so. And this goes with Bataille and all that. It's sex and death and eroticism. Carl Anderson had a really good review of. I mean, I don't have a copy of the book. I mean, I should pick it up and read it. I was about to.
You sent me a screenshot a while back.
Okay, I did, because I was about to read the book actually. I've read bits and part of it in graduate school, but when Carl Anderson put it together, I was like, yeah, maybe I should read this the way he puts it out, because I'll look at the text and be like, okay, this is interesting, and this is how I think. It's just I just haven't. The way I think is I haven't. My library's over there. It's the way I take text and the way I can find it useful. Because when I was reading and learning about it, especially like the solar anus, things are inversed, right? I don't know if you read like Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun, where the sun is decaying. It's kind of like a metaphor for a solar anus. It's not that the sun grows plants and society is happening. A sun is now an anus. Not like it's a butt. I mean, that's a transgression part, but the butt is now like going inverse and everything's becoming darker and you're resorting down to nothingness. And again, this all has to do, I think, with some ideal of sameness and liberalism and decay of liberal. You do not find enlightenment having sex with black men. You thus become black. And it's almost like, citing Andrea Dworkin here, she called it the last laugh. The last laugh is by the guy who had sex with you and penetrated you when you put your guard down. And the woman thinks she has something to say because I had sex with that, or it's going to ruin my image. And I'm seeing this all the time with these Instagram prep girls and who they did not and what not had sex with. And that's really interesting to note, because you can't just reduce sex as everybody does it. No, it's a spiritual connection, even in pornography. If you allow a black guy on there, you're spiritually black, right? That's why there's standards, or that's why they pay more for guys. Are you going to have sex with a black guy? We'll pay you more, right? That's why there is that level of that
there's a sadism to it, right?
Right. And so I'm thinking you can't be like Sasha Grey and be like, well, I'm actually an industrial musician, and maybe I did 3 times I had sex with a black guy, but that was just for the money. Well, who has the last laugh in that? The black guy does. It doesn't matter if you're hanging out with Raymond Watts. I don't want to hear that. It's more like it's kind of show and tell. And I feel like there's nothing to like about a person who degrades themselves, and smart people know that. And that's why the smart porn actresses pick and choose who to have sex with, kind of like a racehorse. I know that sounds really weird, but it's true. You go to adult convention, you ask, what's your commission? What's this? Well, I have a list. I only have sex with guys who have 6-packs, who are talented, who do this and have this and must pay that. That means you have standards, even when making money. And we've lost that in capitalism because we don't know how to make money and we don't value ourselves enough. And nobody wants to hire us anymore if we have AI, which is a good thing. So I'm saying we're going to transition to an ideal where Marxist ideal that we can, fish in the afternoon, as he puts it. We're going to be fishing in the afternoon more often than not, than working something we really don't have to do. And I think the sad story is that a lot of people do not know what that is and how to find the hobby in art or writing. And I think women, especially millennial women, are having the worst. They think it means sex. And it's like, no, you should be having kids. And that's why they have a high body count of 50 and 40. And like, this is why guys don't want to talk to you or gay with you, because if I'm just another dick and another story for a Sex in the City narrative, you're the gross one. And that's why I think it's very important for men to have that and uphold the SMV. It's not that alphas should win. It's just that we're over the Charteau Hartis hookup culture bullshit, and we're looking to be natalists. Like, if I could say any good thing about black men at this current moment in time, is that black men do not do it without a condom. They will literally have RK strategy, 3 kids with 3 different women at a time they're 25, and they're like, well, who's wearing a condom here? I'm having kids. I might die tomorrow. And they're right. The E.O. Wilson RK strategy, where if whites and Asians are like whales and you only have 1 or 2 kids and give them the best education, if white nationalists want to survive, they actually, as crazy as it sounds, you have to be like black men like Andrew Tate. In other words, have sex with women, divorce, have sex with women, divorce, or just get anyone you find and not wear a condom on. That spirit seems to be gone. They now shame you for doing that. And it's like, well, the reason why there's a white decline is that they're not acting like their black brethren. Blacks can do it. They don't care. That's why the divorce rate is so high with white women and black men. So the RK strategy has to be implied to white men if they want to care about saving the 14 words, right? Well, one more thing. The problem with the 14 words is that it does not promise wealth. It says we must secure the future and existence of white children. Well, the future doesn't promise wealth, and existence could mean 5%. If there's 5% white people, the 14 words is okay with that. There should be 16 words. We should provide and wealth, but there's nothing in that. And I had some weird analytical arguments with like National Social. I thought about writing about this, and just my funny analytical argument was, in the analytic, nowhere does the 14 words say have more white children. It says future and existence. Well, if you're 10%, you're okay. If you're 5%, that's okay. You exist in the future, but you're not growing. So somebody's going to say the 14 words and not grow whites. And I think that's very dangerous.
Of course, I made the. I think you saw the meme thing I made where it's the 14 Hapaborean words with the ALYSA LIU doing the Roman with the blue eyes.
Oh, I think I might have seen it. I mean,
yeah,
a lot I see on it.
Yeah, it's not important. I thought it was funny, but I think yeah, I mean, it's the funny whole argument that, oh, we're not having kids in America because we can't get a job, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, like you say, these communities, they're having a shit ton of kids. They're the poorest people in society. I mean, I don't know if it necessarily requires white people to be philanderers, but they seem to have more kids, regardless, right? Regardless whether that's
you can still do. The philanderers don't have to wear condoms or shoot out,
right?
Just shoot in, but they don't, and only like 1 or 2. So there was this joke I had with a friend being like, okay, what if the philanderers did get the children pregnant? Whatever, would we have like esoteric Eurasian wiggerism because you would have no dads at the house and everybody succumbs to yeah, but I'm like, no, it wouldn't work that way. It would just be that's the problem you're betting with, because F. Rodger Devlin in Sexual Utopia and Power, you have a high polygamous society with no husbands at home, then everyone's fending for themselves, and that's bad because you can't have a society. And I sometimes think that's what they want, is so that you can create more chaos and craziness. But again, I'm a natalist, okay? I think it is a natalist right to have children even if the dad's not at home. I think the anti-natalist conspiracy is real, and that this Peter Singer / Eugene Thacker, Chris Korda ethos is entering white nationalism by saying the society to reduce harm. If you were to have a Eurasian child, he's more likely to be a school shooter. Therefore, do not have children. It's this weird David Benatar non-existent argument. And you see this in work in Greg Johnson too. They're all interviewing anti-natalists and people who are saying you shouldn't have children until you're prepared. This is the problem. Many whites think that life is a privilege when the rest of the world knows that life is a gift. Chinese know that life is a gift, and so does BRICS. It is only in the G7 countries that life is a privilege. When you start saying, I can't afford a child, well, who cares? You'll go down when the ship dies too, whatever. And that's the problem. What's going on is that, the natalism, I think there's some weird, when you talk about eugenics, the eugenicists get a little picky about how they have kids. They want there's two he has to do this and I have to do that. No, you do it now. You do it at like 22, just like your grandpa. They don't want to do that. And so that's the problem I'm seeing. And I think there's an anti-natalist conspiracy. And it's amazing when the anti-natalists come out and they're citing bioethics and Peter Singer and UG Thacker, who's like, oh, I have the right to be mad because I don't want to live this life because I would rather live in New York. It's crazy.
Yeah, and an anti-white,
Right.
anti-natalist
Right.
drive,
Exactly.
obviously,
It's
right?
right.
Yeah. Anyone who says that Great Replacement is a myth at this point, it just can't be taken
Exactly.
seriously. I mean, it's just a fact. And I guess that's kind of my white pill for the Gooner Act position, because it also depends on. So here's the thing with Gooner accelerationism: you don't need artificial general intelligence to be realized for this to happen. You just need it to be able to simulate all these things, right? So obviously, is it probably going to be more addicting if you actually had simulated consciousnesses within these, simulations? Sure, but you just have to trick the user into thinking it's real. And this is already happening on a micro level, right? Where people are killing themselves because ChatGPT told them to, or they're depressed when ChatGPT gets updated and they lose their past personality for their AI girlfriend or whatever. So it's already proven that on some level the lower minds already subservient to this artificial mimetic of human relationships. So, I mean, as Sora gets better and we can visually attach this fake personality to the visual, right? Like, it's just going to explode. And I think the white pill I have out of that is, like I said, I think it's going to predominantly affect the global south, the populations that are sort of threatening European demographics, that are threatening civilizational building and higher culture, because there just isn't this conflict with the irrational in a lot of these cultures. They don't really deal with the irrational in terms of dealing with what Bataille would call the glorious operation. They don't care about non-productivity. Everything for them is an input and an output. It's a response to stimuli. So I think that they're going to be most susceptible to the Gooner accelerationism. So the 14 words is totally inverted, because now it's like, well, let's say, for example, this is what I say. Let's say out of the 7% of whites left, 1% of them are able to resist Gooner accelerationism. But then out of the 93% non-whites, only 1% of them resist Gooner accelerationism. Now it's going to be different, because I think Asians will also have a little better ability to resist it, probably similar to whites. But the point being is that all of a sudden the demographic ratio shifts based on who can reject this sort of ultra addicting utilitarian experiment. And that's going to change the entire dynamics of natalist sort of, is the third world going to be able to replace the first world demographically, et cetera? But I'm not saying we should depend on that by any means, right? Like, I'm also a pro-natalist. Like, I mean, maybe I should just end this podcast right now and just go get busy. I kid. But but I think that there is a potential solution or white pill out of that we shouldn't depend on, because we don't know what's going to happen. But it's something I think about sometimes. But where was I going with that?
Well,
But
I'm
yeah,
just saying, I'll put it this way. The anti-natalist, they care more about privilege and living the bourgeois lifestyle. The mantra is live your best life. Well, if you live your best life, it doesn't matter what legacy you'll have. You're living your best life. Well, that seems to be the thesis of all existing liberals and deradicalization program. Let's put it like this. If no one has kids and everyone just has sex, we're no different from gay people in San Francisco. We just brought homosexuality and gay culture and sex as procreation to heterosexual normal people. So if it doesn't matter who you have sex with and everybody's bisexual, what's even the point of desire politics? And that's what they're doing. As Alex Jones says, they're turning the frogs gay. Whether it's estrogen and Burger King or fast food, that's what's happening. Everyone's gay. People assume you're supposed to be above it and you're supposed to be this perfect image, and you can't. So it's pretty much just, there's too much overthinking going on, and you just have to do it. You can think to know what's going on, but at this point in time, they're literally trying to make everyone gay and everyone the same. They're doing this. They want to make sure everyone's promiscuous, everyone's on drugs, everyone's crazy and suicidal, but we're all one family, right? It's insane. And so this is why ultimately, like, it's almost like if you're to not do any of those things and be straight edge, they get really upset and mad. You must be the new prude. But it goes to show you, it is like why the anti-liberal is so dangerous. It just means I want to be a gay man. I want to have kids.
no, I totally agree. And I think, to sort of, I guess, centrally summate the general gist of what we're trying to get at is, I did the thread today on the different, like fascism isn't universal in application, but there are particulars of fascism which kind of are universal in the sense that they all have, they say like socialism with Chinese characteristics. It's like fascism with X characteristic, right? So, of course, the example I gave was National Socialism. And by National Socialism, I don't mean what you were saying, but obviously the Hitler National Socialism. Like, that's the German fascism. Phalangism is the Spanish fascism, right? Italian fascism is just Italian fascism. I always say, if America is ever past the point of no return, I have no hope. I've been told I pass enough in Italy because they're all like, a lot of them are Moors anyway, so they're like, yeah, you just passed there, so I'll just go join Casa Pound and become a young black shirt in Italy. Worst case scenario, but I'm not doom or playing. I'll stay in America.
Well, I think it's true that people are leaving the United States and going anywhere. If it is Europe, if it's not, you might have the most uptight white liberal who doesn't believe in race, and then they move to Germany and say, I'm a German citizen now. I belong to Germany. The reason why is that, this is like almost like a leftist talking point. You didn't have an identity in America. You're just white. Now you're German, right? So it's a guy who marries a Japanese woman and moves to Japan. You now feel like it's yours. And that reminds me of the property argument. I mean, I don't know if you read Kurt Doodle or Prometheanism, but the point of being is that is all of liberalism just the ideal of owning things? And of what you own, is it a biological right or is it subjective? You can't fetishize your own race and you fetishize something else. Why is that immoral? I thought I owned something that becomes it. I mean, certainly it must be moral if a black person's trying to be white, but he's not shamed for it because he's not, a criminal. But it shows you that there is this weird ideal of, if you do believe in securing property, it is this kind of social Darwinianism and Malthusianism going on in the text that demands that everything stagnates. I keep the swimming pool in Lake Tahoe. You're not allowed, and you should die. I should kill all the Japanese so you won't continue Japanese legacy. It is literally kind of this ethos of like, and this is like kind of pseudo-Marxism too, the capitalist class keeping all the wealth to themselves. They can have all the hot Japanese women. You can't. So that shows you what's going down. And I think that's why ethno-nationalism could be used as a proxy to secure people in elite positions of power so they get to have it. You don't, because they want to make the gate really hard for that way. So that's why there's an Indian guy going on saying that don't do this or you're problematic. And so, again, the psyops is really hardcore now, and it's more than just MK Ultra at this point. And this is why I'm a guy who now believes in like CIA intervention and all this stuff. And I'm not saying everything I don't like is CIA, but what I am saying is that we've lost our critical thinking skills, and that the government knows that social media and not having internet independence is a way to socially control us to get certain outcomes. Whether that's like the base Democratic president in about 2 years and Gavin Newsom runs in, like, no, guys, he's different because Nick Fuentes said he's going to make America white again, and he's Democrat, even though he's no different from Obama. How they do that. So it's going to be really crazy in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's like the sort of rupture that Zizek talks about is just like I kind of empathize with that, because at a certain point, we're just so. It gets to the point where you and I can question ourselves and be like, okay, am I sort of feeding a Hegelian negation for this liberal?
Oh yeah, I think about that too, and a lot of people assume that as well, being like, why are you celebrating Eurasianism? You're not even Eurasian yourself. And I'm like, well, it's the desire politics that have, and it's just, there's a lot of other things too, growing up with it, seeing other people, and there's your call to truth is very important. I mean, if somebody's a white nationalist because they saw all throughout their life white people dying, they have the right to be a white nationalist. But then again, there are post-politics of what is nationalism if you can't even define it. If there's a perfume nationalism because you like things, well, what is where you're from? Why does it matter? Maybe we've moved past post-nationalism and it's like diaspora, that whoever, and if it's just a collection of aesthetics, are we just liberals? There has to be something more than that. And so again, I think we're at this boiling point where the alternative right is a collection of anti-liberalism, and it's not this left-wing, right-wing paradigm per se. Those are just market terms. And rather, some people would even say, is there a future for whites? Is it about white? And if that, then you could be Haas's American Communist Party and still be a white nationalism. The rhyme zone possible world is endless here, where you can push the dialogue further. But then again, are they trying to this is the Zizek part, are they trying to de-radicalize us to be liberals, like we're no different from like in the 90s, and that I should be accepted at the most left-wing leaning thing? And this is why we should have priorities and we should have discrimination, is simply because I don't want to be associated with some liberal journalist that hated me 10 years ago, because they still fucking hate my guts. So why would I care? And people do, I just, it's a high school. The high school mentality has to, I've always was the weirdo, the school shooter at the high school. So we should embrace the school shooter term if that's the possibility, and find your own form of freedom that way. Why would you want to become the person you hate?
Exactly. And this is the whole sort of, I guess, thrust of my whole axis of being thing. And this is why I think that at a certain level, the modes of beings of different folks or people should be authentically followed, because it's the only way to live authentically and sort of resist this. I call it entropic negation, the entropic negation of capital. The only way to resist this kind of, remember who you are, so to speak, or in the absence of being able to remember who you are. We don't have an amnesis as a Hapaborean people. We have to hyperstatize that in the future, which, I think is quite exciting, right? Because we do have to do the Turkmen thing and make up our own history. But, for whites, I think they do have to, like European peoples, especially in specific but nations, just the folks that they come from. I think it's a better way to phrase it as folk rather than nation. I mean, like you said, nation's a left-wing concept, right? But the folks, right, in all these different European countries, the only way to live authentically and to sort of resist being subordinated into the system of objects, to resist being part of the entropic negation of liberalism, right, and liberal capitalism, is to kind of remember who you are, because at least that's a stable axis of being in which you can be in the world, and you could resist this sort of, constraint that's coming from all sides. And then for us, for me and you, we're still part of that. We just have a different means of reaching it. We have to hyperstatize that. We don't have that mode of being that's been prescribed to us over time through history. I mean, you mentioned liberalism. Sure, liberalism makes sense in some frames, like the Anglo mode of being is liberalism. But of course, liberalism applied everywhere doesn't work. And this is where I think Dugin has something to say, right? Like there's different modes of beings, and the only way to live authentically in the sort of Heideggerian sense is to embrace those modes of being, whereas we have to create that. But fundamentally, right, there is the symbolic identity which is above everything else, the symbolic identity which we kind of have to nominally subscribe to, and just resist that sameness and resist this sort of great leveling. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's with the shirt I'm wearing right now for everyone to see. I got it from Casa Pound. It's O Roma o Merte. It's when they marched on Rome in 1922. And what did that represent? That represented the arm of symbolism and symbolic value reasserted over capital, in my opinion. That's kind of how I view fascism, is the reassertion of the human subject. And it might just be one human subject, but it's at least a subject. I mean, like I said, most people are human capital. Most people are going to be put into the Gooner pods, right? By choice, voluntarily. Most people don't have agency. So the only way forward, I think, to have any agency at all is to just say, okay, most people are human capital. Universal liberation is universal sameness. It's a great leveling. Even if it were possible, it's not even good. So what we have to do is we have to reaffirm this discrimination, right? This distinction, this sort of Nietzschean pathos of distance. And that's going to come from something kind of fascistic. And you got to find fascism with Hapaborean characteristics, so to speak. But of course, I disavow. I'm not fascist at all. I'm wearing this shirt as a meme to show how much I hate fascism. But anyway, that's
well,
sort of
I mean, the symbolism
my
matters. I mean, the board games, the synthesizers in the back room. I mean, before coming on here, I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody's aware of their mirror stage. But it's no surprise. I went to School of Visual Arts and I wear that. So, and the way you kind of use these signifiers to say what you really are. I mean, not to be a hipster. I get that all the time with the safe sleazy shit, but it's more like it's a joke on how much can you translate. It means something to you. Casa Pound means something to you, right? And it's not that I'm, your sincerity isn't just signifiers. It isn't just to woo over in peacock and perform. It actually must mean something to you and what's going on. And I think that's very important. But reaching the second 2 hours, I wanted to ask you something about that. I remember you came to New York City for Rachel Haywire's event in New York. Did you actually make that?
No, I wasn't able to go. I just interviewed her about it the week before.
Okay.
I wanted to, though, but I didn't end up going.
Okay, because I remember you texted me and you're like, hey, I'm in New York. I'm going to Haywire's event. And then for some odd reason, there was another group of DS people that's like, no, you're having an event right next to School of Visual Arts at the Ludlow Center. And then we went that. So, which was funny because I was supposed to be at Rachel's event. And then it turns out Rachel's event was clowned upon by the press and they did all this stuff out against her. And then my event was kind of just forgotten. And then it turns out the future Moldovan citizen and some others, they went to my event. And at the same time, Rachel was just texting me yesterday being like, who are these people behind the donors and things like that? And we might do another event in the future where it's just me and Rachel doing something in New York because I'm very close by. But it shows you there's a lot of weird stuff going on where we don't even know who's behind who anymore. And sometimes I think, like you were saying, I might be a pawn to something else. And Rachel, she's just Rachel. I mean, we're, whatever's going on. Basil just had his account nuked on X. I don't know if you follow Basil, but he had 50.
I don't like him though. So
I'm just saying.
I was kind of happy.
Some of his stuff he says is very on spot. Whether you like him or not, it's just the point in being, I'm very diplomat here, is that if you're on X and you share sensitive information of the opposite, whether you like or not the opposition, you get canned for it. So I don't know what exactly he said or what they didn't like, but it tells me that could be us. So I'm just saying whatever silo, and when I say silo, like a walled garden, X, Instagram, TikTok, you got to be on your knees. And I say declare internet independence and make an HTML static site because I'm just seeing this more often. I'm going to have www.asianaryanism.com come up again next week. I made a brand new website in HTML static. It should be up next week, just fine tuning it for a bit. And that because it used to have been a WordPress, but now I did some fun stuff, and my Asian Aryanism website with my stuff should be on it soon, and I'll have a new website ready. But right now, the social media territory, it's getting a little kooky. And a lot's going down. As much as so many people I know might hate me or love me or whatever, I think the only thing I'm not saying we should all be friends. We all equally hate other people. I'm telling you is that this isn't a good time to be a liberal and not a great time to say we're in a high school gang together, because I think there's a lot of people who just want us dead. And it's like a scary game in a eyes wide shut masquerade. So just be careful out there.
Yeah, I know. I gotta resist the sort of solipsist arrogance I have sometimes. I always think it can't be me. I'm the main player in the game. It can't be me, but it absolutely can.
Right.
And I got to be safe sometimes. But I mean, I guess the last thing I'll say is, if anything, the way I see using all these tools or dealing with elites and stuff is the Musso method, right? These guys at a certain point, they got to depend on the fringes. They got to depend on the heterogeneous fringes of society, and the hope is that maybe somehow you on the fringe can sort of subvert or subordinate the homogenous elements of society to what you want. And I mean, maybe that's idealistic thinking, but I've been working my way up. I've been talking to some interesting people, so I'm hoping that it moves forward and I don't get nuked or killed or assassinated. But if I do, Pilleater's going to write a nice article about me.
I will.
He's not going to write a bad article like Mishima, because he's going to write a nice one about me.
I will always write. Listen, I'll write any article. If somebody says, can you write an article on my book or anything, I write for free. I don't charge anyone anything. Everything I write, I'll write. If you send me something and say, I will write it for free. I just haven't been writing because I've just been DJing every week. I've been busy with my family. So as a dad, it's kind of just whatever. But I would like to do another season of writing again. It's just, I don't see it at the moment. But yeah, I will write whatever. Even though I'm an anti-Gramscian, I definitely can write it.
Yeah, if I get assassinated, you'll write a nice.
Yeah, I will. I will. A beautiful.
And you have to. If I get killed brutally, you have to instead of the Mishima delusion, you have to create like the Salty Cove.
I tried to do it, say a song, and everybody pointed fingers at me, being like, "You're a fucking creep. Why would you be an porn actress?" I'm like, "Cause I knew her." And it's like, no, it doesn't work. And I'm like, I guess it can't work. But yeah, no, I will. It's just, I'm a very nice person. I will write anything by anyone, but it's just, people are so divided today, But
I want to point out to the people like you and I have had disagreements about certain things. We can respectfully talk about it, and stay friends. Like everyone on the internet now, if you fucking disagree about one thing, they want to just kill you, and it's like so stupid. You know,
The Jim Goat approach. Everybody just became Jim Goat. Everybody became this wannabe skinhead that thought they were like Lydia Lunch or something. And it's like that Gen X lifestyle isn't helping anyone. And that's why I put the emphasis on straight edge culture, because it's not that you're Antifa. You're just confrontational about those who want to be transgressive for the sake of it, and it's very not productive. And I've had talks with many people about this before, even the tardy types, but it's so funny what people will believe and will shoot back at you, and they don't talk to the primary source. They will literally call me a schizophrenic pedophile because somebody else told them to. And it's like, okay, I'm right here. And it's like they don't. And it shows you their true intentions, especially if you go to war. That person's not going to have behind your back if there's a shootout. So just saying.
Right. Absolutely, but we will be in the front lines of the Hapaborean revolution side by side. So if the time comes, what's the thing? What Mussolini says is like, if I move forward, follow me. If my rifle drops, grab it. I don't know. You know the fucking quote I'm talking about.
I was a huge Mussolini fan in high school. I had the Christopher Hibbett biography, and I read that one when I was just harmless in high school because I liked fascism and military politics, like harmless. I just thought it was cool. I didn't think much of it.
That's how everyone starts. What did Yarvin say the other day? He saw, guys in Nazi uniforms. He said, "You know what? I'm going to be right."
Well, yeah, he's just right, because you're just like a military. But Zoltanus was the same thing. He's like, I just like military history, so I'm just going to read it and write about military. I was the same thing. I liked Mussolini, though I never 100% went on. But it's like, yeah, if you just read a book and then it's fascinating, it's great. It's not that it's verboten.
Yeah, and yeah, I'll probably have Zoltanus on at some point because he's done a lot of good stuff on fascism and Gentile.
I mean, I just disagree with his drug use, but that's whatever. I mean, he'll go over it, but it's whatever. I like Zoltanus a lot. I'm just saying, we've known each other for so long. I just say, stop doing drugs, man. It doesn't make you cool. That's my straight edge emphasis, but I'm just putting it out there. But he'll understand.
He's D'Annunzio maxing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he wants to do it, but if he dies or whatever, okay,
right. It'll be a loss, yeah. But thanks for joining the podcast. We were talking about doing this for a long time. I'm thinking of doing, in which case I'll definitely have you be part of that too. Is I'm thinking about starting a Hapaborean live stream where I just talk to people.
Oh yeah, and do bro shit. Yeah, I mean, I have that same ideal with a couple of friends too. I mean, I have one friend who I'm really close by. He works for Adult Swim. I know this is liberal. I have liberal connections. Don't get me wrong. I'm hiding my power level, but I do come from liberal connections. So this is why people get really crazed about me. I have one friend who worked for Adult Swim, worked as an animator for MDE, and he said, like, dude, we should just do like a funny podcast with a third person, and we talk about day trading, why everything's crappy, post Aaron Clary, art shit. And he's like really well known, this guy. I don't want to say his name, but he has a Wikipedia article and he's kind of really well known. We talk, and I'm his neighbor, so I go over his house sometimes. And we thought about doing something like that and just like getting these figures together. But yeah, I would definitely join. 8 years ago, I had the Lost Eurasians show with a kid who was, you could find some of the shows on the Internet Archive or on a proxy server on BitChute, but I forget. I think his name was Steve. I never really got to know his real identity, but he was forever for it. He called himself the Anti-Cleric Eurasian. And we did about 10 shows, including there's one loss where we had JF Garepi, and this is 2018. I'm trying to find it. I asked people around for it. I think President Sunday might have a copy, but he's very reluctant to give it to me. But again, that happened. And, but yeah, if you did something like that and just did a come town bro show and just tell jokes all the time, I've been trying to do that forever, but it's just the way you present. I'm not a Nick Mullen, but it is funny to get into the exoterica and just be make a joke after joke, because a lot of people get that from me too. How does he know all this shit, right?
Yeah. We'll have to see.
You have me, and then Thomas 77 and Zoltanus, and I'm just dude, I'm straight edge. I don't like your heroin use. I don't like your drug use, and here's why. And then we just go babble. It sounds like a rant. It sounds like a bants, but it's actually a serious talk about drug use and whatever, and everybody cites their side. I mean, again, is this liberalism or is this something more than that? And it's it really gets to people. And then you're saying thing again. It's not that a blood sport, but it has this kind of walking way where you're saying anything that comes to your mind in 60 minutes. But yeah,
right. You'll see if YouTube allows that, but
no, they wouldn't. That's why you have to do it on Internet Archive, Rumble,
right?
Proxy servers, yeah, for sure. Telegram.
The safe for work version will be the YouTube, and then the more fucked up.
Yeah,
one.
and then you just censor it. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, we'll have to do that. But anyway, HAPABOREA is fucking coming. The Hapaborean revolution is being realized. ALYSA LIU is just the beginning. She captured the hearts and minds of many Wignats, and they say, oh, well, maybe there's an aesthetic vision. Like we said before, the future is essentially whatever you want it to be, whatever you want to hypersynthesize, whatever you want to imagine. And clearly, the Hapa has a place in that imagination. People don't want to just be white. They also want to be Hapa. They also want to experience sexually the Hapa ideal. And I think that's exactly why Hapas matter. And why Hapas aren't just a cope, because clearly there is a beauty and a unique aesthetic to the Hapa, and that's why we're gonna persist and prevail and be victorious in the end. But we stand by our Hyperborean brothers. We stand by New Rome, and thank you, Pilleater, for joining. Any last thoughts before I do the last spiel?
Yeah, sure. I blog on www.pilleater.com. I have a weekly DJ show that usually comes on Saturday for now. I do write articles and whatnot, but I'm also on X at x.com/realpilleater. My TikTok is Pilleater, and there's just a bunch of links from whatever I'm writing about to my music. Just busy with DJ mixing at current moment in time, but I will have new music releases and as well as maybe a new book around the corner. But yeah, www.pilleater.com as well as youtube.com/Pilleater, and you can find out whatever I'm doing or doing daily video updates. So yeah.
And we'll put the links down below, and you can check Pilleater out. And yeah, well, thank you, Legionaries, for watching. If you made it this far, you'll have a Roman eagle delivered to you by drone by a little cat with a propeller on his head. And you give him a nice pat in the head, and he's going to give you your Roman eagle. But thank you, Legionaries, for watching. As always, this is the Warrior Philosopher, building the foundations of the warrior philosophy. Awe Nova Roma, Awe Hapaborea, Awe ALYSA LIU, and Awe Caesar. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.